All right, in order to access the analytics module, you'll need to, from IT Exploration, choose the additional module business analytic documents. And once you get in there, you can download all of these various documents to use. We're going to be looking at the presentation briefly, the overview information, and then whether you use the learner or facility Excel files, you will need to open those also. So please pause as you need to open things. Personally, with the facilitator, there are some macro embedded formulas that I could not get to work through my school's network, and so I did all of my formulas on my own. Once you have everything open, well, let's back up a moment. Let me just briefly show you both. This is the PDF of the overview of the entire analytics process. I showed this to my students, but it wasn't quite so interesting for them. I also walked them through the PowerPoint, and it was just walking through. There's some excellent activities about, exploring and learning more about the analytics field that you can choose to do with your students as you go through that. And but what I'd like to focus on today is actually showing you, of course, how I did the analytics unit. So, how I began this process with the students is we created a simple spreadsheet of just a budget. And once we did that, since some students have never done formulas before, I showed them how you use the sum feature, which is up here. The screen kind of cuts it off, but it's when you're in your home tab of Excel, it's the auto sum. I showed them how to create an average formula, a count, and then I said biggest number, which is a max, and smallest number, which is a min. And all of the formulas show in your formula bar. And once you have a formula created in one spot, you can just grab that little green box in the lower right-hand corner, click and drag, and then that formula copies to the other cells. So we did that, and I showed them obviously how to do a little, accounting number format, just so that they're aware of that feature. After we practiced, then we began working with the actual data. And in the first practice exercise, then what I have open here is the Excel file that includes both facilitator and student files from the Advanced IT data files. But what I did is I saved the one for students to my students, and I just am going to be using these tabs here. And here's the nice thing about them. There are 4 exercises that you do with this, and each time you start a new exercise, you go to that corresponding student spreadsheet file here. It's the same data for student 2, and student 3, but the nice thing is if they made any mistakes in a previous exercise, they could start with a clean slate. My school district also uses, we have a one-to-one iPad initiative, and so the all of our curriculum is organized using an app called Schoology, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And so I was able to load the Excel files into Schoology and then have the students log in from their desktop computers in order to be able to access Excel. This does not work using Google Spreadsheets. Okay. The 4th exercise is one that involves charting and graphing. So after we did the practice Excel file, then we would come to the very first exercise, and from the Advanced IT data files, you are able to grab all of these analytic worksheets for the students to complete as they're going through their information. So the first one that we're going to do is this worksheet here, where we're going to just use those same sums, averages, maximum, minimum amounts, and then the students are just going to fill in the dollar values that they get. So this first one is pretty easy. You're just going to calculate starting with totals for all of the different 3 different products that you're tracking, total revenue and total gross margin. That's going to be the first thing we do. And with this exercise, I told the students, you know, as you look at the chain, what does this sound like or what does it look like? And they said, oh, Quick Trip, or excuse me, Quick Buy is Quick Trip and Bullseye is Target, etc. I said, great. Well, this is actual information. What's the difference between urban and rural? Why might all these stores have a different number? So they kind of had a feel for what they were looking at. And then by just going to the bottom of the file, whether you choose to have a blank line or not, you would just type in what you're trying to solve, and then starting with Q-Lite, Q-Rigs, Q-Super, revenue, gross margin, you would create your formulas. And I do that, let's see, from my home tab, and let's see if I can capture that part of the screen. No, it's not going to allow me to go that far, sorry. So I go to my home tab, oh there, I got it, and then I'll go to auto sum. And the fact that this blank cell is selected also doesn't matter, but if that really bothers you, you know, you can change that within your formula. But we'll check that's a great formula, we'll check it in, there's our values, we'll fill to the right, and there they are. And then you'll do the same thing for average, for max, for min, and then the students are just basically transferring those values to the store or to the particular worksheet that they're filling out. Okay, so that takes, the first worksheet is pretty self-explanatory because it's just using the sum, the average, the max, the min, and the count feature. And you've already showed the students how to do that through your practice spreadsheet if you choose to do that, right? So now on to the second piece that you're doing. You are going to be using the filter feature starting with the second activity here, and it's asking you to find the 5 stores selling the highest or the most in these 3 products, and then the stores with the highest revenue, highest gross margin, etc. And so for this activity here, as we fill it out, we can go about this a couple of different ways, but I always try to keep it easy for students. So we're going to start with the Q-Lite because that's what the first activity asks us to determine, is which stores sell the most Q-Lites. And so if I click on my data tab, that's what I have selected above, I can use the sort or I can use the filter option in order to find this. And filters I think are fantastic. So this is how I teach it to students. By turning on the filter button, you'll see that you get all of the little drop down arrows. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to find, and I realize when I come to number filters it says top 10, but we can change that to top 5 here, or we could still do top 10 and then just look at them. But once I do that, I get now the data for my Q-Lite information, and I'm able to now copy down the stores that had the highest top 5 highest numbers. And because we talk about this, well, what do you do if there's a tie? There's a tie of 400. Those stores did the same. So you're actually going to list 6 for this first one. And then you can just go back to select all to get all of your data back, or you can deselect the filter button, which turns it off, but I like to show all my data again and keep the filter on, else you have to reapply it. But if you do need to reapply it, if it ever turns off, no worries. You just make sure that you have your label line selected, and then you turn the filter on and you're able to access that. So you're going to be doing filters for the Q-Lite column, for the Q-Reg column, for the Q-Super, for the revenue, and for the gross margin for this exercise. And then it asks you to find which particular stores. It says, okay, of the Bullseye stores, which ones had the highest revenue, and of the Quick Buy stores. So you can do double filters in that case. We could start by saying we only want to see Bullseye stores, for example, and that's all I'm seeing now. And if I want to know which are my 5 highest Bullseye store, I'm going to apply a second filter. See, my first one selected only the Bullseye stores. I'm going to go back to my filters, and I'm going to, for the in the revenue column, I'm going to choose top 10, adjust it to be top 5, and now Oh, that's interesting. I must have done that wrong. Let me get back to all of my data again. And if that's not going to cooperate for me, then what I'm going to do is just do a sort within that column. And it looks like it's not cooperating. So let me go back and select all again. And I'm still only seeing bullseye because that's on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my revenue column and I'm going to sort. And I'm going to say that I want to sort my revenue values from largest to smallest. And then now I can easily see my top 5 there, even though my filter wasn't cooperating, which I'm not sure why it wasn't, but that's another way to do that, through the sort. So that takes care of your second exercise. Now for your third exercise, this is where you get to have a little bit of fun and use some features perhaps you've never used before. So what I have my students do is go to number 3 now in case they goofed something up. And here's the important thing to look at first. Notice that in your date column, the spreadsheet is already sorted by month. And so what we're going to practice something first before we switch up this data, because it's kind of slick to see that on the back side of sheet number 3 that you're doing, which is this sheet here on the second page. I'm going to go second page and then I'm going to go first page. They want you to create a subtotal report by month. And this is maybe something that you've never worked with before, that subtotal feature. And so I like to show this to my students first because they already know how to now be able to filter just Minnesota information. That's easy. That's continuing to use the filters they already know. But when they get to the subtotal information, that's what's brand new to them. So what it's asking us to do is create a subtotal by month. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our cursor in the month column, and we'll come over and once again I'm in the data tab again, and I'm going to select this subtotal here. And it's saying, okay, well, what do you want to subtotal? Well, let's subtotal all of these categories except store ID, but what we want to do is we want to sort by date. So at each change in date, we're going to subtotal all of these columns at the same time. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so in the subtotal, once again, make sure you choose the data you want to organize by. In this case, it's date. And then you select all of these. And when we do that, this now gives us January totals, February totals, etc. for each month and for each product line plus revenue and gross margin. And then over here, you'll notice you have these buttons 1, 2, and 3. Button 3 happens to be selected. If I go back to button 2, then it just highlights only the totals for me and not all of the information in between. And if I go back to 1, that's just giving me the grand total. So 3 gets back to all of my totals. Okay, so then when you can either do a left arrow to undo this to get back to your data, or you would come to this subtotal and then just deselect everything to get it back. So once again, the front side of this worksheet just has you doing additional filters. You would filter just Minnesota data first, and then you would do, remember you can do double sorts filters, and we'll do one together real quick, both Minnesota and urban. So now what I'll do is get I'll just say I want to remove all to get back. Now what I'm going to do in my state column is I'm going to turn my filters on, and I want to say I only want to see Minnesota data because that's what the worksheet's asking me. So now I'm only seeing that data. And once I have that, it's wants me to do a sum for Minnesota now of revenue and sum for gross margin. Then the second question says, find only the Minnesota records for urban stores. So I've already got Minnesota filtered. Now I'm going to only see the urban stores. And so I do that, and then I've just added a second filter, and then I can go ahead and sum the revenue and gross margin columns. Then it's saying, okay, now let's see only the rural stores. Well, no problem. We'll just select that, deselect urban, and there we go. So with your filters, you're able to get at the data that you want to get. The final activity in this exercise was creating charts and graphs, and that's very simple, and it gives you in the fourth spreadsheet, it gives you the data that you will be using to create those charts and graphs and tables from. Thank you for your time.